Hey everyone, I'm Mark Huber. I am a product manager at DigitalOcean. I work on the Deepass team. Deepass is our managed databases product. And today I'm going to have a lightning talk with everyone to discuss some of the recent releases we've had in Q1, and then also take a little time to answer some of your questions that you may have. So let's get right into it. And first off, let's take a look at our agenda. Oops. Sure. So first, we're going to quickly recap on what a managed database is, how the service works, what value it provides you. We'll then kind of touch on some of the recently released features, kind of highlight their value, and then we're going to do a demo of a recent feature that we've released. It's actually still in beta, but it's pretty exciting. It's related to online migration and migrating your data from any data source or any data provider into the DigitalOcean Managed Database service. And then at the end, as I mentioned, I'll be taking some questions. Great. So to get us started, just to kind of give a high-level overview of what a managed database service is, specifically within the context of DigitalOcean. So DigitalOcean Managed Databases, you can kind of think of them as a database as a service. We offer Postgres, MySQL, and Redis. And some of the kind of key features and why you would use the managed database instead of rolling it your own, are kind of below. First and foremost, and probably the biggest one, is it's resilient. So we have automated failure recovery built in. If your node fails, we're automatically going to roll over to a new one. You have, as we talked about below with scalability, you can add read-only nodes. You can also add HA nodes to kind of improve or reduce the amount of time it does take to fail over in the event of an incident. So if you wanted to have a primary with a secondary, if your primary goes down for whatever reason, it's going to immediately cut over to one of your standby nodes. Or if you're looking to improve your read performance, you can also choose to add a read-only node. So again, there's a lot of options there in terms of scalability, and you can also mix the two. Another great benefit is how seamless we make it. And that's due in large part to the new data migration feature that we're introducing that, as I mentioned, is currently in beta. We call it online migration. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. It's extremely hands-off. We handle all the patches, maintenance, and updates for you. So minor patches and minor updates, those kind of handle in the background during a maintenance period that you're able to define. And then major version upgrades, so say like going to PG 11 to 12 or PG 12 to 13, you are able to opt into those and kind of do those at your own pace so that you're not running into versioning issues with different features you're using, or in Postgres, different extension issues, etc. And then in terms of reliability, we offer you 7 days of point-in-time recovery that you can fork into a new database at any time, down to the second. And we also do two full backups every day so that you can create a new instance, which we call forking, at any time should you want to. So that's really kind of the high-level benefits or use cases of a managed database. Again, it's really just hands-off. It's to set it and forget it, and you can start worrying about your data and your applications and not managing the database itself. One thing I did forget to mention at the beginning of this talk is I will be taking questions at the end. So I'm not ignoring any of the questions that do come here in the comments channel. So things we've released in Q1 that I wanted to highlight during this lightning talk. First is some of the version upgrades we've made. So Redis 6, it shipped back in January, and we've actually recently released and upgraded to Redis 6.2, which has some improvements with the pub sub within Redis. We've made improvements to the boot time. So one of the themes that we noticed a lot during our kind of analysis and kind of digesting all the support tickets that come in, and it's worth noting that I read and review every single support ticket that does come in. So if you do have a problem, please do reach out to us. It's something we do take to heart at DigitalOcean, not just at Deepass. But one of the things that came up a lot is just the general slowness and how fast a cluster was coming up, whether it was creating a cluster with Deepass directly, or if you were doing it with our app platform and our DevDB. We noticed that customers would like to see a faster boot time. So right now we're seeing about a 30% improvement. We hope that we can get more, kind of tighten that up a little more and have those boot even quicker. But again, a 30% improvement is pretty good, and we're pretty happy with those initial results as we continue to refine them. Another new feature, a new option that we've recently released is our dedicated droplet types. So for the past 2 years since Deepass has been our product, we've only been allowing Deepass on our shared core virtual machines. We will now be supporting both our general purpose and storage optimized types for MySQL and Postgres. All of those are with dedicated CPU. And so with our general purpose nodes, those are just a good balance of CPU, memory, and disk. Storage optimized, the ratio of disk is going to be quite a bit higher. So if you're needing kind of a higher storage disk, it goes up to multiple terabytes. I forget the exact number. Previously, you could only go up to about 1.2 terabytes. Now you can go up to multiple terabytes. As well, with our Redis offering, you can also now leverage our memory optimized droplet types, which from a shape perspective is what we call it. So the amount of CPU, memory, and disk, they kind of over-index on memory. If you wanted to, for whatever reason, you also have the option to kind of over-index on storage. Not exactly a use case for Redis, but that is just one of the general benefits of our memory optimized droplets. As I mentioned before, there wasn't just one version upgrade that we shipped this in Q1. We also have begun a slow rollout of Postgres 13. Right now, that's been made available to about 25% of our customers. And over the next couple of weeks, we plan on gradually making that available to more and more customers. Anytime we do version upgrades, major version upgrades, we typically like to kind of take that slow, especially with Postgres when you're dealing with things like extension compatibility. We like to be cautious or conservative, if you will, as we roll that out. And then lastly, something I wanted to touch on is our online migration feature. And kind of to talk a little more about that, I'll go ahead and go on to the next slide that details it a little more. So online migration, it allows you to quickly migrate data from an existing database, no matter where it's located. It can be a database you're running in a different cloud provider. It could be a database you're running on your own droplet. It could be even on-prem. No matter the case, we allow you to quickly migrate it over to DigitalOcean. So how that works is there's two types of migration that could occur. There's either replication or there's a one-time dump. You can kind of think of that like an export. So replication is made available based on what credentials you provide us. So some of the parameters that are required to be provided are a username, a password, the database you want to migrate, what port it's over, any SSL options you have, etc. So if we're able to set up replication in your source database to the new destination database, which is the DigitalOcean cluster, we'll set up replication. That means we'll begin replicating your data, and we'll continue to do so until you stop. So that makes it much easier to kind of plan for cutovers to DigitalOcean Managed Databases versus if you just need to do a one-time dump, say the data isn't updated that often, or maybe you're like a heavy read-only database and it's not something that's doing a lot of writes, that is a great option. That'll purely just take a copy or a snapshot of what's in the database currently and dump it into the new database. If you are using the replication-based feature, like I mentioned, it will continue to run until you're done or you're ready to cut over and make the Deepass cluster, the DigitalOcean Managed Database cluster, your kind of primary. At that time, you can hit stop, cut your applications over, and have them begin to read and write from the new DigitalOcean Deepass cluster. So with that being said, I want to quickly demo this. And as always, what could go wrong in a live demo? So let me pull up my terminal. So in the top here, this is a Postgres database that's running on a droplet. And on the bottom here, I have a empty Deepass cluster with nothing in it. So in this database that is running on a droplet, I've loaded a kind of dummy set of data. I pulled it from Postgres, their organizational website. It's stats related to the NFL, American football. So if you take a look, if we look at the databases, you'll see the Postgres database is here. It's the one that's going to contain our data. So if you look at the tables here, you see it's a bunch of data about the NFL and various things like that. Another thing we can look at is we can see that there's data constantly being written to this right now. So we're at 514 there, 439, etc. So it's just showing that this is constantly being written to. So what I'm going to do now is actually set up the migration to this default database. So as you can see, I don't even have a Postgres database here. We have the default DB, which is kind of what you get out of the box with DigitalOcean Managed Databases. So I'm going to cut over to my destination. So what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go to the top right here. You'll be able to set up a migration. It'll give you a couple of heads ups. So you need to make sure that your destination database has enough storage based on the source. So it needs about a 30% amount of buffer. So it needs to be about 30% bigger in terms of disk space than your source. The user privileges are what I referred to before. If you only need to do a dump, the user only really needs read-only. If you want to set up migration, the user needs an enhanced set of credentials or access control enabled, and that is covered following this link. And you also need to disable any firewalls you have set up. So we'll move over. And it is worth noting, you'll notice that I'm doing this on Postgres right now. We currently have support for Postgres and Redis, and MySQL should be out in the coming weeks as well. So I'm going to go grab my IP, and then I put it here, and then the port. So it's the default Postgres port for this one. The database I'm pulling over is Postgres, as you saw. My username is Postgres. Put in my password. I do not have SSL set up because this is not in production. And I'm going to start the migration, and it's kicked off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick back over here. And then in my destination database, we're going to list the databases again. You can now see I have a Postgres database. And so let's run this same query that we were using up above in the source, and let's run it in the new destination database. So first, let me switch over. So I'm now in my Postgres database, and then let's run that query. And you can see it's now doing live replication of my data. So this will continue to run as long as I want. I can continue to write to the source, and it's going to replicate over to the destination as long as I want it to. So once I'm ready then to cut over my applications and start running to this new Deepass database cluster, I can come up here, I can stop the migration, and then I'm done. So that we should see it'll bleed it off, and eventually it'll stop writing. So you can see now that the count is not increasing, the replication is stopped, and we're good to go. We can now start using this database as our primary database, or whatever use case you may have. If I was to do this as a one-time dump, I would have entered the connection details as needed, and it would have taken a snapshot or a dump of the source database, put it into the production one or the new destination one, and that would have been it. It would have been done. So very simple. So again, that's great for instances where you're not doing a lot of writes. So if you're doing a lot of reads, you're not making a lot of updates to your database, whether you have a blog that maybe doesn't have a lot of comments, but it's just a lot of static content that you're not updating that often. A dump is a great use case for you. So great. So with that being said, I do want to go ahead and move on to Q&A here for our lightning talk. It is worth noting that if we're not able to get to your questions today, we will be sharing in the chat as well as in the YouTube comments. We will be sharing a link to our ideas portal. And I do recommend that you check that out. We read those every single day. You may have noticed in my screen, you would have seen the little icon in my pinned tabs for AHA, which is our ideas portal provider. Every product manager at DigitalOcean reads these questions every single day. Every product manager reads your support tickets every single day. So we hear from you. We use that feedback to guide all of our product development. So please do send those in. So first question, this is more of a tactical one we've heard a lot, is on MySQL databases, when they are spun up, SQL require primary is always enabled, and that kind of trips some people up, especially I believe with Laravel. I believe that's one of the frameworks where that's required to be disabled for certain reasons. The reason we do that is without primary keys on some tables, it can cause replication performance to be extremely degraded to where it's not even usable. And that's a vast majority of our users aren't using Laravel. So we would much rather have someone kind of reach out to us and discuss that with us rather than run into issues with performance kind of out of the gate. So that's why we do that. We hope that we're making that quick enough. The support turnaround is typically pretty good. So if you do need that or any other parameter or flag enabled or changed, please reach out to support. We're happy to make those tweaks for you. Yep. Another question is, does Deepass ship kind of natively with any other products within DigitalOcean? So right now, you can actually spin up a WordPress instance and go ahead and have that attached to a Deepass database cluster. We'll go ahead and set up all of the connection parameters for you, and that will just be using a separate database cluster out of the gate instead of using a local one on that WordPress droplet. And as always, like with anything DigitalOcean, we're always taking feedback, support tickets, any other questions you have into account when we're designing new features that we're looking to introduce in the future. Then one of the most, probably the most common question we're going to receive throughout this chat, and we get the most often, is what new engines are you releasing this year, if any? And with that is, this would be somewhat of a general answer, and I apologize for that, but anytime we, again, receive these requests, that type of feedback is the first thing that we take into account when we're identifying new engines or new features that we want to introduce. And while I don't have any specifics to share on anything that we plan on releasing this year, I do recommend that you go to the ideas portal, that you vote for things that are already there. If you see something that you were going to ask but someone else already has, or you do submit your own idea, because we take these to heart. And it really does mean a lot to us that you guys take the time to do that and that we're developing this community around that. There also is a great kind of community section to that. If you do have any questions about leveraging Deepass, any types of tuning, those types of things, people from the community and people from DO are more than happy to answer those questions. And if there's questions they can't ask or they can't answer, those questions actually get filtered over to us, and we do the best we can to address them and answer them as well. All right, so let's take a little more. Sorry, let me pull my screen over. Again, I'm seeing a lot of questions about like MongoDB. Again, we do constant have constant discussions with users, with businesses about their needs, about the types of payloads they're trying to run, or workloads they're trying to run, including engines, including new features that would make their lives easier. And those are taken into account any time that we're developing new features or looking to release whole new products. So no specifics to share at this time, but do know this type of feedback and these types of questions will be filtered back into that kind of list of requests. Yep, lots of Mongo questions, Scylla, Raven. Raven's actually maybe a new one for me. I see Eric. So if you wouldn't mind, again, visiting the ideas portal and throwing that on there. If it is already on there and I just had missed it, I'm sorry. But please, that would be interesting, an interesting one for me to look at. So I do ask that you throw it up there. But Mongo and Scylla, I do hear about. So Dave is asking, are there any secure wiping when discontinuing a database? So what he's asking is, when a database is torn down or a cluster is torn down within DigitalOcean, how do we kind of, how can we guarantee that that is, from an audit perspective, completely wiped? I wouldn't want to offer that answer right now, but I can say, Dave, that is something that we can get on our docs page. So I will work with our legal and compliance and audit teams, the typical teams you'd expect at a company like ours, to get that posted to our doc site, because that's a great question. And I appreciate you asking that. So Pavel is asking, we need to monitor the health of our managed database, specifically disk usage. How can we write something like a script or an API call to watch for the disk filling up? So currently we do offer the ability to view the disk used on a cluster within DigitalOcean. If you go to the Insights tab, we do show you that graph, the disk used graph. And in the top right on that page, you can set up alerts. One of those alerts that you could set up would be kind of like disk % used, and it can alert you via email or Slack, I believe is the other option, about whether you're kind of getting close to that threshold. As well, we do have alerts that we'll send out to you directly once you get to the, I believe it's 95th. When you get to 95% and maybe 97%, we will email you directly saying, hey, you may see degraded performance if you don't upgrade to a larger plan. Another thing is to know that is once you hit, again, I believe it's 97%, there is a chance that writes may be turned off on your database just so that your disk doesn't fill and it doesn't overflow, which would lead to a very bad time and even the inability to connect to your cluster, which is not great. If it's worth saying that if that does happen, please contact us support. We can flip that back for you so that you can start truncating databases, printing databases, whatever you need, etc. Clement Tong asked, are DBs backed up in multiple DCs? So our backups are indeed backed up into a different data center than the one the database cluster is located in. So that includes both our twice daily full snapshots, and every 5 minutes, we take a snapshot of the wall, the delta in the wall since the last time. So every 5 minutes, we take a snapshot of the delta. That also is shipped to a separate DC. So Joel asks, when will we be able to add more storage to manage databases without upgrading to an instance with more power? So I would say this is, I want to say it's either the second or third most requested feature. So it's definitely one we know of. And again, sorry to use the same refrain again. Now that we're a public company, we speak in generalities a lot more, unfortunately. It's something that we know about. We know it's an issue. It's something that, again, we take very seriously when that feedback is provided. But it's not something in terms of a forward-looking statement that I can really offer on at this time. And that'd be the same to any of these questions. It's kind of like I can't confirm or deny, unfortunately. So Ryan Olson, are there any plans to secure database connections with App Platform? That would be a great question for App Platform. That isn't that kind of, we'll just say kind of that connection management is handled on their end. So that would be a question for them. So again, I would recommend hopping over to the ideas portal. If that question hasn't already been asked, I would guess it has been. I would ask it, follow up maybe, and see what type of feedback you can get from Phil Dougherty or Moises, who are the PMs on that team. They're great guys, and I'm sure they can help you out. So Christian, with this new service, I can, okay, yep, so that's more of a comment. Not seeing too many others. Oh, sorry, there's a new comment. Sorry, 1 second. So Pavid asked, okay, Ryan, I'll get back to you 1 second. Sorry about that. Are there any technological differences between the different sizes? So I guess there's two ways to look at that. There's looking kind of like horizontally and vertically. So within a specific database type, droplet type. So say you have our general purpose. Our general purpose, as you kind of scale up, you're just going to get more CPU memory and disk. We aren't adjusting anything like IO or anything like that. You're just going to get more disk available to you. You get more CPU cores available to you, more memory available to you. The difference is going to be is when you kind of move horizontally within droplet types. So there's our standard droplet types, which has been the only thing that's been available up until about 2 weeks ago, whereas those were shared CPU. So even though you may be going up in the number of virtual CPUs, those were shared. So in theory, you could be susceptible to something like a noisy neighbor. Whereas when you move into our dedicated types, whether it's general purpose, storage optimized, memory optimized, those are dedicated CPU, and you should see substantial performance increases. Our managed DB memory are CPU optimized. Sumitra, sorry, Ryan, I'll come back to you still, I didn't forget. Sumitra, our managed database memory are CPU optimized. It depends which engine you're going with. So with Redis, we have those scoped to our memory optimized types, as well as our standard, which are the shared CPU. And then we don't really have kind of a CPU optimized. We have general purpose, which is really just a good, healthy makeup of CPU, memory, and disk, but is dedicated CPU. And we have storage optimized, which is similar general purpose, except the ratio of disk is much higher. It goes up to like 6x, I think. It's like 1.5, 3, and 6x, I believe. So Rodrigo is asking about vaulted JSON. So we do get a lot of requests about various plugins. And again, those are something that we continually evaluate. And we hope to release more soon and more compatibility for other extensions soon. Yeah, sorry, again, I apologize for these general answers, but there's only so much I can provide at this time. Okay, it's good to see that we see a request for DCs in Hong Kong. So that's something I can take back to our compute team. Ping is quite bad from China and East Asia. So thank you, Clement, for that feedback. Okay, Ryan. So at Platt, they said last month it was a question for you. So Ryan, let's do this. My email, I don't mind sharing with you guys at all. My email is my first name, or sorry, it's my first initial M, and then my last name, Huber, Huber, at DigitalOcean.com. Ryan, if you could connect with me, just ping me, and we'll take this offline, and I'll pull in the guys from the AppPlat team, and we'll see what we can get figured out instead of playing a game of who's on first. So sorry about that. I believe we have time for one last question. So Andrea, he says, do you suggest keeping the web app droplet in the same data center as the DB? Very much so. So if you think about databases and their performance characteristics and where the bottlenecks lie, the biggest one is going to be latency. So anytime you can put your web app as close as possible to your database, you're going to have a much better experience. So if you can keep those contained within the same data center, I do recommend it. I strongly recommend it, actually. And you will see a great, better performance experience, just, again, because of that latency. It may be, when you first see the numbers, like a relatively small difference, from 10 milliseconds to 500 milliseconds or even a second. That's drastically different when it comes to databases. So the closer they are together, the better. So great. So I think that's, we're right at 30 minutes now. For lightning talk, I think we went over a bit, but I really do appreciate all your questions. Again, I shared my email with Ryan, but I also don't mind getting feedback from anyone at all. If you have any questions for me, not only can you go through our support channel, who, again, I read all those tickets personally on a day-to-day basis. If you want to email me directly, go for it. Again, my email is M as in Mark, so MHUBER@DigitalOcean.com. I have no problem whatsoever with you reaching out to me, questions, comments, feedback, concerns. Let me hear it. I love to interact with customers. Everyone at DigitalOcean loves to interact with customers. So definitely feel free to reach out with anything you may want to chat about. And that especially goes for requests you may have. Hey, this is the type of architecture we have. We're running this type of stack. How can DO help me? Whether they can help me right now or they can help me in the future. What can you do for me? I love having those discussions. It is worth noting this chat was recorded. So if I spoke too quickly sometimes, which I'm prone to do, please feel free to go back on YouTube and check out this video. And again, stay tuned for other great releases we have coming out throughout this year. They're very exciting, and we hope you enjoy them. So again, thanks all for joining, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.